I'd like to call this meeting to order at 7:16. What's today, the 10th of April? So the first thing we need to do is some adjustments to our agenda. So we have a few things here. First of all, in discussion matters, number 6, and action matters, number 7, you'll see that there's an action matter, 7.3, approve the calendar 2012 and 13 snow days. We're going to pull that up into discussion and not take action on it at this time. We'll explain a little more later, but the timing isn't working out with the rest of the districts in the CSSU to get that approved quite yet, so we'll talk about that. Program Council is here, so under 5.0 reports to the board, we'll actually have them, they'll be 5.5, but we'll move them up in the agenda to go next before we start our presentations so that they can leave if they so choose. And let's see, the other thing is that we will have an executive session, so that'll be before adjournment, obviously, and that has to do with assessments. So we'll be talking with Elaine about our administration.
On the consent agenda.
Yes.
I need to abstain from the special meeting notes or minutes. I wasn't there, so really have no ability to.
Okay, well then, unless you need to pull it out, why don't we just have you abstain when we go through the consent? Are you okay with that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Or do you want to vote on the other two? You're good. Okay, so I think that's it. So with that, let's start with the Program Council, folks. Welcome.
So our most recent meeting was in late March, and it was not too long after the first budget vote. So that was really the focus of a lot of our discussions. The administration gave a presentation about the budget proposal, some of the elements that they were looking at in terms of the results of the vote. And then we broke up into focus groups based on the idea of if there's a situation of declining enrollment, how can we ensure that the integrity of our education that we're providing in Williston is maintained? And it was a format we've used a lot, where we're trying to generate ideas for the administration to take into account when they're making decisions. So some people worked on things like how could we improve our collaboration between programs. Other people looked at materials and facility use as areas. Other people also looked at guidelines, like what are some things that we should keep in mind when we're making decisions about adjusting for declining enrollment or possibly increasing at other points. So that took up most of the time we designated for Program Council. We generated a list that were submitted to the administration, and it looks like they did a lot of work with that in their second proposal, which you guys saw recently. After that, we broke into leadership committees by building in the same room, and we talked a lot about testing before school. It's a thing that has been piloted in kindergarten and then over at WCS in 3rd and now 5th grade. And we're thinking about how can we roll that out to other grades, because it makes a big difference in terms of the time teachers have in and outside of the classroom to do the required benchmarks for students. So the ABS team looked at that a lot. There's some options that we might be able to do for fall testing, and WCS has talked about that, and they've also talked about some facility uses that apply to their building. We have an agenda pretty much set for the next month. We're going to talk about membership in the Program Council, thinking about how do you get selected for that, what is your role. I think there's that really nice dynamic. People who are in the Program Council get to contribute their views, but they also get to get a wider view of the district itself and what it's at play. So we want to make sure that it's an experience that is available to people throughout the district. So we have a real well-educated faculty and staff. The other element we're going to talk about is communication within the district. It's a topic that's come up both years as something that members would like to talk about, but it's been a little bit undefined. So we're actually currently generating a list from program council members to say what are the issues within this idea of communication, what's working, what's not, and so we're trying to kind of put some frames around it so that when we meet in May we can talk about the issues that seem to be most pressing or interesting for program council members. And that's it at this point.
Thank you for all the hard work
Yeah.
you guys did for the budget.
Yeah,
This
we
is-
know
like
that
I said,
was-
was incredibly valuable.
Yeah.
There's a lot of work there, we appreciate it.
Yeah, there, and I think for the program council, I think folks really approached it with a pretty positive mindset. It is kind of, you're not sure where things are gonna go, but I think people really came in with some constructive ideas, and we're thankful for the administration for running with that and applying it. Great. Okay,
Thank you very much. You sure you don't wanna stay? You sure you don't wanna stay?
Thank you.
That's great. Great. Do we have any public comment before we go forward? We all set? I didn't think so. I just want to make sure. Okay. So let's jump into the presentation. Great.
We have special places to stand. We've gotta be good here.
You just have to sit behind it.
All right, so Carol Huntington, our literacy coordinator, I'm gonna do introductions right now, is here to help present. Caitlin Bianchi, our math coordinator, and I'm Jackie Parks, the building principal at WCS. Hi Kevin, since we haven't officially said hello since you joined the board. Joan Beato is also very involved at the middle school level with literacy. She was not able to be with us tonight, so Carol and took the lead, and I'll chime in as well. And this will include science results, and science we have teacher leaders, we don't have coordinators of science, and I serve as at the 3-4 level. There's a K2 teacher rep and a 5-8 teacher rep who takes a big lead, but she just had a baby, so she will not be joining us tonight. So here's the big picture. So I think, you wanna go ahead a slide? I'm gonna start where Molly ended, in that we have a lot of great things to celebrate within our data this year, which is exciting. We also have really areas that we will continue to work on. Most of them have already been targeted in 1 or 2 years into our work. So NECAP results, as Molly talked about, are used for program improvement. We look for trends as we look through our NECAP results. We do comparisons across schools, especially looking at schools with similar demographics, because that's very helpful to us. We examine specific children's achievement, and within each area there are subcategories that are representative of our grade level expectations, so that's particularly helpful as you look at a child's work in math or in literacy multi-year. Examining achievement within demographic groups, which you'll hear a lot about, because we have had a huge focus on our students on individual education plans as well as our low SES students. And just overall system accountability to make sure that what we're teaching, that our curriculum is fully representative of the GEs, which is what this test is based on, which is all based on national standards in all areas. So another just big picture piece, we have the NECAP happens in reading at every grade level, 3rd through 8th grade. So we have year-to-year data that's really helpful in a lot of ways. In writing, it's only in 5th and 8th grade. So part of our local assessment plan that Molly helps pull together is on-demand writing that happens twice a year at every grade level. So we supplement this with those local on-demand writing pieces that are scored as the NECAPs are scored, and then we look and use that to supplement, because that's a big, from 5th to 8th is a long time. And the 5th grade data represents the K4 program, and then the 8th grade really represents K to 8, heavily 6 to 8 though. Math, it's back to every year, it's given in math, and then in science, again, it's grades 4 and 8. So that's a big gap again. We have, as part of our local assessment plan that Molly helps us put together, there are yearly inquiry tasks that are scored. They'll be given actually in May and April, May, and they'll be scored as the kneecaps are. So that's how we supplement that to really help get a better handle when it's 2 grade levels versus every year. And I will just say before we jump to this slide, can you go back 1 second? So this really represents what's tested. There's lots of other important programs in our system that I'm sure everyone could name that just don't happen to be tested for a lot of different reasons. So this is a big piece of the picture, but there's also a lot more to the picture when you think about our related arts and our world language and our social studies and our theater program and our athletic program and music program and all those other areas that, you know, we don't have those assessments to this degree at this point in time. There you can go. So overall, this is kind of the big picture, and I'm back a slide, sorry. So overall, if you take a look at our reading, math, writing 5th, writing 8th, science 4th, and science 8th, we're comparing how Williston did to the state level. And you can see across the board that we're pretty much all the way across. We're above where the state level of proficiency is. Hopefully, as you look at this, your eyes should go to 8th grade writing, where you can see that we have some real strength there. Our middle school writing program is very strong, and we typically see a big jump between our students between 5th and 8th grade in the area of writing. So it's a pretty typical score. I think you'll also see, as Molly talked about, you know, that science is much lower and 5th grade writing is lower, and that is true if you look at the state as well. Doesn't mean we're happy with it, but that's just sort of the trend across the state. And really, it's hard to, because we have so many kids overall proficient in most areas, you really have to dig far beneath this to really tell the story here. So I think that's important. I think the other thing is, you know, each of these areas has a full action plan that comes with it. You know, that's not the point of the presentation tonight, is to share those action plans, but that's sort of part 2 of the story, and we'll talk a little bit about some of the things we're doing, and you've heard some of them in the past, but that's really a whole presentation unto itself of here's what we're doing about this and this and this and this across the board. So what you really need to know, just big picture, the overwhelming majority of our students, you know, perform very well when compared to the state average. We are typically a couple points below CSSU. I think in science is probably the area that's most prominent, particularly 8th grade, which you'll see later in the presentation. The other big takeaway is, you know, we continue to focus on our students on IEPs and our SES students from lower socioeconomic backgrounds. We've seen some great progress in that area that we will highlight as we go through. But that's something, particularly our SES, that we're really, really pleased with. And you know, what our work is a continuous improvement model, bringing that strong professional development to teachers so they in turn bring it to the classroom, so that we're monitoring that and holding people accountable for that, so that we see the results for all students go up. But it's really about that continuous improvement. And that's really the model that we work on, no matter what the content area. And Carol's gonna jump in with reading, and then Caitlin will do math, and then I'll jump back in for science, just to give you the big picture here.
All right. I really like what Jackie just said about so much of the story is beyond these numbers, but these numbers do represent the high quality of our program too. So here we are in reading, grades 3 through 8, the average. As you can see, 85% were proficient and above compared to 73% for the state. So that's pretty high. This also shows a gentle upward trend in performance for Williston students in reading. Next.
Yep.
That's good. Okay, so For all reading, all kids, grades 3 through 8, 85% proficient, which represents an 8% increase over the past 6 years. In IEP reading, kids on IEPs, their reading scores, 39% were proficient, which is a 20% increase over the past 6 years. That's big. That's very significant.
Can I just understand when you say 8% increase over the past 6 years, like, what exactly does that mean? So 85% proficient today in 2012 versus
Yeah.
8 years ago, or
6 years.
over time?
Yeah.
Over-
6 years.
When I
Well,
look at these numbers,
yeah.
if I'm doing my math right, maybe I'm not. It looks like we had 83% proficiency, equal or above.
When are you looking?
I mean, if I go back 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, am I not? The chart.
The graph, the numbers on your on the graph are not the same as the numbers on your.
The numbers, well, let's see. 70s, okay, are you looking at this one?
I'm seeing 58 for proficiency and 25% for, the other one, I guess, but they're close.
2012, we have
85%.
85%,
And then you have 81%,
81.
so that's a 4% delta.
Yeah, I mean, some numbers are getting rounded up and down here.
Okay.
But it's not 1 year we're looking at.
It's not 1 year
Do
we're
a
looking
6 year.
at.
I don't want to take away from the theme that we're doing good, but it does seem fairly flat.
It does look fairly flat, but let's see, these,
We're doing fairly well.
proficiency with distinction is getting greater. Our kids who are not proficient are becoming less. So, I mean, those are some trends that you can look at. And this is really a significant one. Kids of low SES standing, 67% were proficient of that subgroup, which represents a 25% increase over the past 6 years. And that really is reflective of all the work we've done to look at the performance of kids of that socioeconomic status. So if you look, this cohort reading score is tracking the same group of kids from grades 3 through 8. The percentage of children who were proficient or above showed a 13% increase. So that's forward-looking. So here are our rating scores. Let me just change. Okay, the results in grade 5 were significantly higher this year than they were last year. And we are performing above the state in that. I'm going to talk about the writing test a little bit after I show you the next slide, just so you know some of the context with this and why these scores fluctuate like this. Can you go to the next slide? Okay, grade 8. Results show that Williston 8th graders were 79 proficient or above, compared to 69% last year. That's a big jump. We continue to outperform the state, and the number of students who are below proficiency is shrinking. So that's a really good sign. This is exciting news, as we have focused extensively on our lower and lowest performing students for a few years. And not exclusively, just extensively. Okay. If you look at all the performance of all 5th graders, 56% were proficient, which is a 10% increase.
Versus prior year, or?
Over from
I believe that's
last year.
prior year. Well, I'm not sure what you have, what.
Be careful, because, again, when I look at these numbers, we had 64% proficiency or better, it looks like 6 years ago. Now we're at 56%, so we now have my math is right, it's an 8% decrease.
5th grade, 56%. It was a 10% increase from last year.
Year. But
Yeah.
6 years ago, if we're using the same metric, I just think,
I need to talk about this test a little bit, so you can understand. This,
We can't.
we do not test the same thing year after year after year. This writing test,
But just increase Carol, saying, this, you're saying 10% from last year?
10% from
Yeah,
last
with the reading
year.
one, you're comparing over the 6 years that we've given the test, what
Yes.
the,
Right.
how
So you
much
did
it
two
is.
different-
So
okay.
it's two, you're correct, that it's two different.
Well, I mean, on the last slide, I said it was over the
Right.
last 6 years. This
Right.
is 10% from last year. This is 12% from last year, 12% increase. Kids on IEPs, it was 25% increase from last year. And I guess the kids, no, the kids in 5th grade on IEPs, the N size was too small to really represent anything here. I think there were only 2 kids in that subgroup. So the kids of low SES standing in 5th grade, 40% were proficient this year, which is a slight decrease from last year. And in 8th grade, 53% of those kids were proficient, and that's 11% increase from last year. So this writing test is very demanding, and it changes every year, like I said. So this year, students in 5th grade had to write a narrative about being their favorite animal. They had to write a response to literary text. They had to write a response to informational text using evidence from the text to support the answer. And they had to write a report using compare and contrast structure. So that's 4 pieces of writing. Some are shorter than others, some are long, extended responses. The 8th grade had to write a narrative from a specific point of view. They had to write a response to literary text. They had to write a report requiring students to select and organize information in a response. They had to respond to informational text using an opinion format and details from the text to support the opinion. And they had to write a persuasive response with a clear position. So if you think about all those different genres of writing, they're very different in structure and in tone and in voice and in, word usage and all of that. So this is something that we work on a lot, and we're starting actually in kindergarten with our writing program on up. And especially tackle this in 3rd and 4th grade, we worked very hard on those structures and broadening the way kids write to different audiences. So when you think about the professional development we're doing, we have writing workshop for emerging writers. We are developing units of study in writing instruction across the grade levels. We have collaborative scoring of writing prompts across the houses. So we have all teachers looking at student writing, and they're measuring it against some selected benchmarks and some rubrics that describe the writing. And we are in the process of adopting the Common Core, which I think Molly was talking about earlier. So when we look at supporting classroom level instruction, which is a lot of what my job does, what I do in my job, it's really looking at best first instruction. And through that, I do some coaching with teachers who need some help with their instructional practices. We use data teams to look at student academic data and how they're progressing. We have data-driven instruction. We have coordinated our curriculum from K to 8. We have this year put an intentional focus on vocabulary instruction across the curriculum. We are embarking on adopting this Common Core, the Common Core state standards. And again, the collaborative scoring of writing, which is really a big one. So additional supports for struggling learners and high achieving students, we try to tailor interventions to match the needs of struggling learners. So we have identified intervention programs and intervention practices that hopefully will match the needs of some of our struggling learners. We have enrichment opportunities for high achieving students. Our teachers differentiate their practice in the classroom. In other words, they look at their instruction and break it down so that hopefully they're meeting the needs of most of the kids in that classroom. And we use formative assessment as ongoing progress monitoring. So periodically we stop and take a snapshot of how things are going. And are kids learning what we want them to learn? Are they making the kinds of progress that we want them to make? Is that? Oh, here are our goals. Again, like Molly talked about, the professional development is a big focus for us. We have in-service training in the English Language Arts Common Core State Standards. We are focusing on vocabulary instruction across content areas and in all classrooms. We are going to have guided reading professional development for grades K to 2 in the fall. We are going to have all K to 2 teachers participate in this. We have 3 different days selected for all-day professional development. And we are going to be using use of a writing curriculum. So we're going to be adopting a new writing curriculum that has units of study in opinion, information, and narrative writing. It's a Common Core workshop curriculum. So those are some big goals that we have for our reading and writing programs.
So I have a couple questions.
Mhm.
Is this a good time?
Sure.
So when I look at, would it be possible to return to the graphs,
Sure.
please? So when I think
Which one do you know?
both actually, because both actually
Writing
support
or-
what, yeah, they will both support what I'm gonna ask. So when I take a look at the graphs, right, and I see the results that we got this year, I mean, 2012 versus 2011, there was a clear increase, in the right direction for both 5th and 8th grade. So that's great news, obviously, right? So I guess my first question is, what do you attribute that, because it's a marked jump, what do you attribute that to? And then kind of a twofold, so when I look at your goals, and we have a pretty huge goal next year, right, with a Common Core adoption. So I just wonder how this will look when we take a look at 2013 results. It's going to be incredibly interesting, I think. And are you guys concerned?
Are we concerned?
Like, yeah.
I can, I'm
Go
gonna
ahead.
answer some of
I'm-
those. Well, can you go back to 5th grade writing, Caitlin? So, we realized last year in particular, that the 5th grade writing scores were what you can see.
Right.
They had dropped, we were really unhappy with them, they had dropped. How many were proficient with distinction, how many were just, it wasn't great. So we put a huge emphasis. One thing that we did that was markedly different than other years is that we started the year by this was the 3rd, 4th grade level, was that we took the writing curriculum and they mapped out for the whole year how each of the genres and when each of the genres was going to be taught and how it would be integrated into literacy in particular. We bought a ton of nonfiction books to help support the reading piece, which again then will support the writing because they have to respond to nonfiction prompts, which has been a weakness. So that was another huge piece. We adopted and had professional development over the last year and a half on how kids need to write a constructed response, which is basically in the 3-4 level, like, a good solid paragraph that we all were taught, how to write those and how to have a graphic organizer to really follow them. That happened at the 5th through 8th grade level as well through another graphic organizer. So there was some pretty intentional action steps that, when we look at like that, those writing scores that I think we can relate those to. I think in particular the curriculum mapping for the year and then each unit, like groups of 4 teachers working together to develop those units. So it was much more coordinated than in the past. Now at the 8th grade level, if you want to bump up to that one, Caitlin, I mean, our scores have been, you know, as good or just about as good a couple years ago as they were this past year. It had gone down a little bit. Carol described that, you know, each year there's a different emphasis on what genre they're asking you to do more of in the test. So sometimes it can be really genre specific. I don't happen to know what last year's was, if that's the case. But I think the part for me is at the middle level, our 8th grade writing scores haven't, you know, they've been stronger than the 5th. We've had a big emphasis on those 2 subgroups, which really honestly make up most of our bottom 2 categories. So I would attribute some of that focus on those subgroups and through our data teams, where we're looking at kids each month and saying, okay, you know, here are the kids that weren't proficient, what are we doing for them, not just at that classroom level, but that next level up of double dosing instruction, whether it be reading or writing. So I think, you know, those are a couple things that were markedly different that I think probably had at least some impact. I mean,
Well, it had a huge impact, clearly.
and part 2, just, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, but the other part of it that I noticed here is that perhaps it isn't as much of an anomaly as it seems to be, because if you look at the state numbers on both 5th and 8th grade for 2011, where you had that
Yeah.
huge crowd, the state did too.
Yeah.
So to me, it kind of points to the test.
Yeah. So what genre was it, is what I would want to know,
I mean,
and
you know,
because,
was it an all Chaucer year? I mean, I don't know.
yeah,
I mean, I don't mean to joke
Yep.
about it. Obviously, it went down, and
Right.
that's certainly not the trend we want to see. But that doesn't concern me as much.
When we've done an analysis of this test, we work in teacher teams
Yeah.
and we really dive into the test. We look at the released items and we can find out how kids performed in some of the multiple choice, some of the short constructed responses and long constructed responses. And typically our multiple choice answers, the kids perform pretty well in those. And then less well in the short constructed and really less well on the long constructed. So we spent a lot of time teaching kids about short constructed answers. And then especially with the Common Core adoption, we're going to be focusing on 3 major genres of writing, really. It's the narrative.
instead of 6, so it's good news.
Yeah.
It's deeper,
Yeah.
narrower and deeper.
Comment on that too, Giovanna, you basically say what you're saying, which is, I think it'll do everything to augment the good work that Williston's already done, because it's kind of more in-depth in specific genre, some of which has already started, but it'll just make it go deeper, but in particular around informational writing, which is the hardest. And then short research is difficult too. Kids tend to take that on with a vengeance, and page after page after page, poorly organized, da-da-da-da, and this will focus our instruction on how do you create a short research paper that comes to a conclusion. So I think it'll do nothing but improve. We'll see. I think that the SBAC test itself, though, is going to be harder. So even though perhaps we're going to beef up our instruction because of the core, and that'll be our emphasis all year, it'll be interesting to see what the test chooses to ask those kids to do. So, and that's really brand new for us. We don't know.
What, I have something on it a little different, so, no, if you have more on this, maybe you should continue on that.
I had a question about reading, but I can wait.
Mine's a fairly straightforward question, is what kind of resources are available for the teachers to do educational development outside of the organization?
Oh, all kinds of things, all kinds of things. I mean, first of all, of course, there's our university and college system that offers ongoing coursework that teachers can take and do take.
So they get access to funds to attend a college
Yes.
course?
Oh, yes,
Or
yeah.
workshops.
Do you know how much?
Or workshops or
like a-
conferences.
So anywhere in the United States? So
Well,
like the person who you quoted at the end, if they
yeah,
have a workshop?
Linda Darling Hammond.
Yeah.
And so what's the limit? I mean, they
The
can't.
equivalent of
It's
one
one-
UVM course tuition, but they get, I think, 75% of that if they want to attend workshops instead.
How much would that be?
That's about $1,000 for workshops.
So last summer, just
person.
to give you a concrete, we took, I think
So
I
it's
took,
not much, actually.
but I took every third
It's
and
a lot.
fourth grade
No,
teacher
it's
to
not.
a Vermont Reading Initiative multi-day training that was held last summer. So, you know, when you ask like what's available, that's something where the Vermont Reading Initiative brought in experts from all over the nation, and we had almost every 3rd and 4th grade teacher be able to go and attend that. And so things like that don't necessarily come out of the funds that are allocated through the contract to them. We have some other targeted funds where if we want to do something as a whole school, like in that case, that we can target some money towards that as well. So
So
it's
there's-
sort of a two-tier system.
As somebody who has to do continuing education, that there's a lot of excellent resources available, but they're usually not inexpensive.
Well, so there are 3 funding streams. There's the local availability of the amount of a course that can be used for a conference or used for a course or a workshop or what have you. There's a local amount in your budget here to help things like a concerted effort to take 7 teachers to something in science, and then they tackle that for a month. So there's that kind of funding, and then there's grant.
Like within the classroom or something.
They might
Directed
go,
by
like they all
administration,
went
by the
to
school
a
versus their
Burlington
own
VRI
Yeah, no,
conference.
I'm thinking big picture. I'm kind of thinking people going outside, getting ideas from other sources, bringing them back
Right.
to us.
Well, that's what we're talking
Right.
about. And then
And
the third source
Having it
is
done by
grant
the
funding.
But having it done by
So.
the teachers themselves, so they feel they have a need and they want to go. I don't know, I'm
Yeah,
just
I
used
think
to
in
having a little
general-
self-directed education and I just, I mean, I think one college course isn't enough to go to, I mean, it's maybe enough for the tuition for one thing in Chicago, but it doesn't get you to Chicago and it doesn't
Yeah.
help you stay there, and I mean, I think your quote about how important our educators are, we should, give them the opportunity on their own to grow.
Well, I think
On a
with
grand scale.
limited funds,
No, I
um,
understand that you
provide
need
a
to find.
tremendous amount of
yeah.
professional development.
Well, we have a big budget.
And Kevin, I think actually, I think most teachers would tell you they feel like they get the professional development that they need and want. They
Then
think-
that's good.
Yeah,
That's
I
good
mean,
to
and I
hear.
do think there is a good
And
balance.
that's maybe they're a better sounding board.
Well, no, I mean, I think there is a balance between like individual choice, things that people want to do that pursue their own interests, and a lot of professional development that's provided within the context of things that
Yeah.
we're doing at school. Like one of the things that I was going to talk about is the best practices initiative that we have going on, where all teachers are doing the same math. It is essentially a 3-credit course that all teachers in our whole CSSU get to take, and it doesn't count towards their course,
Yeah.
requirements.
That's
So
an
in that
example of
piece-
a grant-funded project.
But I think
So-
generally, if we have people that, I know people come to me sometimes and say, I wanna go to this math workshop and it looks really interesting, and can you give me some money out of the math budget, or can you help me figure out how to go to this? And generally, we figure out a way to
figure it
pay for
out.
it if it's something that looks valuable, that looks like it might impact us in a positive way, or if it's just something that a particular individual thinks will impact their teaching, it's usually something that is given
So it
priority.
doesn't come up in negotiations as
It is a negotiated
Oh, yeah.
number, it is. We have over $100,000 in the budget for staff development, just for teachers, not including the support staff. And what usually happens is that they will get a second dip chance, meaning that depending on how much funds is left on January 1st, they can put in to take another course, especially if they're getting a master's degree or need certification or something like that. They can actually take 2 courses in a year.
And is there, I assume, but tell me, is there professional development internally? I mean, do program coordinators work with
Yes. Yeah.
teachers and?
Oh, absolutely.
Well, that's the coaching
Yeah.
that Carol talked about, but Caitlin does as well. That's,
Our literacy
Um,
meetings, the coaching,
And-
we've defined our standards of practice in all areas of literacy, and so we've been working on this for 5 or 6 years now. So it's pretty clear where we need to focus our professional development, and if teachers self-assess, they'll say, you know what, I'm not doing a very good job teaching vocabulary, I really need to get some more resources, so they might come to me, I might work with a group of teachers. There are also a few really good sites online. There's the Teaching Channel, which has videos of best practices, and, so there's lots and lots out there.
But there's definitely a model that's in place that looks like coordinators getting trained by outside sources and then coming in and providing that professional development to our own faculty, which I think really works well for a lot of reasons. One, because we're getting that information from a highly qualified source, and then we know our teachers, we know what their needs are and what their strengths are, and so that allows us to really personalize it, but also give them information and the training that they need.
So why don't we continue in the interest of time. We have a
Does anyone
lot
need to
see.
stand up before I start talking about math? Stretch a little bit. Come over. Run
Brain,
this.
brain body work
Yeah.
here.
Leave your normal. So, as you can see from the graph, the math scores have actually been pretty flat for the past several years, which Josh kind of brought up in some of the other graphs, and I think we can look at that as both a positive and a negative. It's negative in the sense that we'd like to see them going up. It's positive in the sense that our scores are consistent, and we actually have undergone many changes over the last several years in math in terms of the professional development that we've been providing, some program shifts, different things that people are working on in their classrooms. So I feel like the fact that we're staying even keeled and we're not seeing the implementation dip is actually a really great thing for us. And actually our proficient and above percentages turned out to be exactly the same, 75% last year and this year. So you can't get much flatter than that.
When did we introduce math bridges?
Bridges?
Yeah, great question.
So bridges, we piloted in 2000 what? This is the
2010.
Yeah,
2010.
yeah.
So
2010.
this is our second full implementation year, correct?
No,
No,
it's
this is our
Third.
third.
So, and we actually brought it on in 2 phases. So we started with the K2 and then brought the 3-4
Well, that's
on.
what I was gonna say.
Right.
Do you really
So it's
even
a-
see that there?
Right, so it's a little tricky to actually, and this is also true with our best practices professional development, because some people piloted it first, so they were really in their second year of implementation, and some were in their first, and even with the best practices, this is the first year that we have people who have completed the 3 official years of best practices training. And yet there are still people who are in their first year of best practices training. So it's a little hard for us to see the growth based on professional development, because we're all in slightly different places on that. But as I said, I think that given that we have people sort of in all different places and many different initiatives going on in math, and have had many different initiatives going on in math over the past several years, it's great that we're still at a high level of proficiency.
Was 2009 a transition year and 2010 was an implementation year for bridges, or was 2010,
So
2010
Let me
was
think
the
about this.
K2.
Yeah, so you wouldn't see
Input.
it there.
see it here? Okay.
No.
All
Yeah.
right. Well, I guess my one area of concern about these numbers is that what I see here is that over the last 4 or 5 years, you've got a trend down in your proficient and above. You're losing proficient and above. You're gone from 34 to 29 to 28 to 25 to 22%.
So proficient. So the red is
That's
proficient.
with
So
distinction.
the
The
blue,
blue.
is the blue is the high above proficiency, proficient with distinction.
So I should not be concerned that I have less kids
So
performing with
I don't
distinction
think you
over the
should
last
not be
5 years?
concerned, but I think our overall concern is, do we have kids who are proficient? Well, we're really looking at the top 2 categories to say, like, these are the kids who are doing well, and these are the kids who are doing outstanding. So, I think, yes, we do want to look at the kids who are doing outstanding and what that trend is looking like as well, but I think we also want to keep in perspective that we're really looking at 75% of our kids are doing quite well in math. They're meeting the standard for math.
If I may
Hey, go ahead.
observe, maybe it's somewhat correlated, even assuming that these are flat numbers.
Yeah.
We invested as a school district a substantial amount of
Right.
money to move to the Bridges program, thinking that we would presumably get results.
Right.
At what point
Yeah.
do we measure the efficacy of that investment?
Great question.
So usually implementation takes 5 to 8 years to see. So we're still a ways out to see the effects of that directly. The trick for us will be, since we have a multi-layered initiative going on, as we watch our scores for the next 3 to 5 years, it's going to be hard to pull out what was the Bridges influence, because we have pedagogical changes going on, we have curriculum changes going on, and we have some shifts in Common Core content going on. So we're going to watch this carefully. It's going to be a little hard to know. We didn't just shift to Bridges because we wanted to see improvement. We did all of this work so we could see improvement. So it wouldn't be Bridges alone. Bridges partly was a philosophical shift to match our pedagogical stance around problem solving and engagement, to match what we do with best practices. So it wasn't all about that program to boost achievement, it was all the other layers with Bridges. So I wouldn't expect bridges to be the only cause. But I hope, and it's our plan, and we went after math with a vengeance because those scores were lower 4 years ago. I would expect over time for us to break through our very constant picture. It's very solid, but I'm hoping we start to inch our way up. It's, yeah.
And it's going to be tricky because of the kneecap going away and SBAC coming on board. So in some ways, we're going to have a hard time
It is.
really comparing data in that sense because SBAC is going to test very different things than kneecap does. So we may be sitting here 2 years from now saying, I don't know if we can really judge where, you know,
This
the
doesn't
progress is
affect
at.
our federal funding or anything, right? This is just a tool that we've been.
Right.
Is
Well,
it
keep
a
in mind is-
federally mandated program? Do we have to do this kneecap? We have to do this kneecap.
a standardized
Yes.
We have to have a standardized test.
Yes.
But there is
Really
no
perverts.
other consequence for poor performance or anything.
There is. This is pretty
You're
important.
in AYP
This is
improvement
incredible.
action, so
Yeah.
yes, there's consequences.
By,
This is-
by who and what are
The
they?
federal government.
Federal government, okay.
Right.
This is,
So they choose our standardized tests or they give us
They
choices?
do not, they just look at our standardized tests, say that this is a good, useful
So is
tool and
kneecap
valid.
going away
Yes,
because,
A new test. will be
because
replaced.
the entire country is changing over to a Common Core aligned test.
and this is something the governor has decided or?
the federal.
National standards.
So, let me,
So the
Right.
federal government does determine what our standardized test is.
Only in recent times. And the federal government hasn't chosen this test, each state has chosen it. And Vermont, the state, has chosen it, along with about half of our other states in the country.
So right
now,
now,
The new-
kneecap is just these, what, 4 New
Four
England
states.
states?
Four.
Right.
So we'll be moving to a different test that encompasses about half the country, because there's been like 2 that have come down.
Yeah, I think that this study's great, you know, and it shows that we're on mark and that we should relax and that we should focus on the important stuff.
Well, you know, I think the point that we want to also think about too is this is one assessment
Can
that's
tell you what it
given
is,
once
too.
a year, and we
It's
want to think
teachers.
about what other assessments do we have that show kids' progress in different areas. This test doesn't really measure things like best practices, so kids being able to justify their thinking and kids being able to explain what they're doing and all those things, or how they communicate about their math thinking with somebody else. You're not going to get that from the kneecap. So we have to look at this as a piece of data that we want to keep in mind and that we want to pay attention to, but not the only piece of data that talks about our math progress. And that's part of it. Yeah.
The
And-
one thing that we're
Go ahead.
getting now is the demographics of the kids in Williston has changed over 5 years.
That's true also.
We have,
thank you. Good
I
point.
mean, this is just data it's meaningless, really.
Well,
Well, I would
It's
agree
the
with you
best
there,
test
but-
we have. And granted, but there's so many variables, and it can be interpreted in a lot of different ways. And it's what we have to work with, and, you know,
And that's one of the reasons that we do things like compare it to the state, because we kind of look at, okay, so of all the children in the state, how are we doing? And, you know, consistently, we are doing better than the state's doing. And, you know, if someone from the federal government even was gonna come look at our kiddos, that they'd say 75% of the kids are, you know, meeting or going beyond standard, they wouldn't be coming to us worried that we're not doing well enough. They might be looking at some of our subgroups and asking us to delve a little more deeply into those, but overall, when we look at any of the results for Williston, we're not overly worried about our kids' progress. So, you know, I think that's important to keep in
I
mind.
think what we're
as
doing
well.
is fine tuning
Yep,
so we can get even better, but it's
absolutely.
it's a lot of that fine tuning, what's underneath, because you know, overall, our scores are good.
Yeah.
So you have to really pop the hood.
But in the interest of time,
Yeah.
bring us
Keep going.
along the science.
Okay, here we go.
Keep it rolling.
I can talk really fast, Kevin. no, it's true.
Yeah.
People who know me will tell you that.
I know that firsthand.
So we'll just go through this quickly. So as we said, flat scores. The IEP scores we are somewhat worried about because we're not seeing as much progress with that subgroup as we are with other groups of kiddos. But when we look back to, you know, in 2005, we had 24% proficient. Now we have 22%. So it's not like it's changed that much over time, but it kind of goes up and down if you look at those graphs. And they're definitely, you know, as I said, a group we'd like to see more progress with. Our low socioeconomic status kiddos, 13% increase when we look back. So from starting back from the first time that we have the data to now, over the past 7 years, there's a 13% increase. And 52% proficient this year as compared to 46% last year in 2011. So that's a nice shift. That looks like we're starting to see some progress in that area.
How does that delta compare with other schools within our district? Are we all about 20 points?
In terms of the IB
SES,
math.
well, no, SES.
Oh, SES going
Yeah,
up.
I would have to go back and look. Just given what the cumulative SU data was, I want to say I think so, but I would have to go back and look at each school.
I think we made a little. I think Wilson actually made a little bit more progress in the math on the for the kids with low SES. In this last from 2011 to 2012, it looked like we did. And then in terms of the cohort, which is again that same group of children over time, a slight increase from 7th grade to 8th grade where they are with that. And so when we think about what are we doing in math in Williston, that is, we've kind of touched on some of these things already, but we have a best practices initiative. We're talking about fact fluency. We've done a lot of work on our curriculum coordination, lots of professional development. If you talk to teachers in our school, they tell you that we spend a lot of time working on and talking about math, and it's an ongoing process. The folks who finished 3 years with Teachers Development Group this year are still working on their best practices, so it's not something where we do it and we're done. It's something that we're constantly working on getting better and better. And just as Carol said, we're really fortunate in Williston because we have interventionists and we have enrichment teachers at all grade levels to help with kids at all ends of the spectrum. We have a lot of good assessments that we're looking at. Folks are really focusing on teaching practices that allow all children to participate equitably. So we feel like we're really heading in the right direction with all of our professional development and with the supports that we have in place in the classroom. And again, just our goals are to continue with the professional development that we have already been working on, and with continuing to tweak our services for kids on all ends of the spectrum so that we're making sure that we're providing all of the interventions and all of the enrichment opportunities that we can. And in the interest of time, we'll move on to science.
Thank you. Okay, so back up to talk a little bit about science, starting with looking at grade 4, which again is representative of our K-4 program, not just 4th. And what you can see is, we have a slight upward trend headed in the right direction that we're pleased about overall. We've beefed up in the last 2 years in particular considerably the work we're doing in science at the K-4 level. So curriculum alignment happened, trying to think, purchasing tons of nonfiction text to supplement classroom instruction, so kids are, when they're reading, getting that extra dose of science as well. Inquiry, yep, the formative probes, which are like, in science, if you look at the curriculum stuff, there's a lot of research-based misconceptions that kids have at different developmental ages. And there's a whole bunch of what they're called formative probes, but what they are little mini assessments that you give kids to before you work on a concept, so you can get a handle for exactly where are their misconceptions, so you can head them off the pass. So those have been adopted K-8, as well as a weekly inquiry time has been adopted. So it used to be science and social studies in the lower grades flip between a science unit, a social studies unit, a science unit, a social studies unit. Again, it's that fitting it all in that we talked about, but 2 years ago we said, but every week, every class has to have an inquiry time where they're really looking at inquiry and having kids work through inquiry in their science notebooks. So that was a big shift as well. So this piece is, we're happy in the direction it's going. We have obviously more work to do. Our elementary teachers, because they teach everything, have been really involved in the math initiative. As they graduate from that, they're slowly jumping onto the Vermont Science Initiative work, which is the professional development that we're working on for science teachers. And we've had, I think we're 4 or 5 out of our 12, at least 3-4 teachers now have taken that and are involved with the SI. So there's good stuff happening, more growth to come, but that's the grade 4. So grade 8, I'll back up and say, when I'm gonna move, sorry. This was a particularly huge low point, obviously, that we were extremely unhappy about. Every single middle level teacher in science has taken the Vermont Science Initiative coursework. They continue to update that training. From that, they also have the probes, which are those mini assessments. They have science notebooks across our whole system, which is really a focus on kids working like scientists, recording like scientists, collecting data like a scientist, doing analysis. So really trying to make it very authentic. Our science labs, as you know, I mean, everything's been upgraded. There's been a huge influx of resources to that curriculum area. You also heard Molly say, it doesn't happen overnight. So, we had we didn't have anything statistically significant happen in terms of these proficiency levels. This, that's not good. That low point.
Any idea about that? Because otherwise, it's a fairly good
I
story.
don't. Yeah, I don't actually. That's something I don't have a good.
Well, does it have to do,
Hypothesis.
it has to do with over time, 4th grade on, the task is getting harder and the gap's getting wider.
Yeah,
So
no, I
how-
understand
but-
that, but it's just that
But see, we
one
went from
below
It
proficient.
looked like we really made, we did
Progress.
make a nice jump, but
Yeah.
then it kind of went back, that lowest performing
Yeah.
group. So that's
Mm.
definitely a concern that we're looking at.
The other thing is sometimes you have to go down to like the student level. to
Well, all
figure
right,
out,
because I
because it
understand,
can
these
be,
aren't,
like,
this isn't a
1 point
cohort.
less.
These are
One-
different students every
Right.
year.
That's
So
right.
there's
Different
class
studies,
differences. and-
Right, but I mean, like, if you look at individual results, you can see, like, sometimes, like, kids might be, like, 1 point lower, and that they didn't make the cut by 1 point, versus, which is a different kind of an issue than,
Yeah.
okay, all these kids are really, really low in this category, so.
Going back to that cohort idea, assuming that that's a better measure of how curriculum is being effective, if that's a fair assumption, this test will never get us that data.
No, you can look at how they did in grade 5 and then at grade 8,
Yeah,
like
that's
Molly
all
did that for the CSSU level. I mean, that's
When we go to the Common Core, are we going to get
a
better cohort data?
So we don't have unique Common Core science standards. They're really wrapped, as our social studies wrapped into the ELA work. However, the next generation science standards that are national just arrived. I just got the link yesterday, and I sent it out to everybody. So we have a whole nother task, I have to be honest, it's very daunting to think about working with Common Core and helping our teachers implement the new science standards. As of yet, there is no conversation about a new test for those.
You guys do get some small time to teach the kids, right?
A little bit, yeah, a little bit.
So
Speaking of PD,
when
so.
Common Core is implemented, are we going to lose all testing data for science?
No, so we will continue, I never finished my answering, I'm sorry. We will continue to give the kneecap science until we hear of something else. But I haven't heard a buzz about anything else, so I think it's not on the radar right now. It's a good question. And to your point, we do have to be careful. What we really look for in data like this is a trend over 3 years before we, because this is one class at a time, different classes, so, yeah.
So I think I already talked about most of this, but what you need to know is a pretty large action plan was put in place several years ago, and I feel like we've been really on target with it and keeping it in our forefront. First and foremost, it was curriculum alignment. When we reconfigured, there was some curriculum realignment that had to happen to make it more efficient and to take the 4-year cycle and divide it into 2 2-year cycles. So all that work happened. That the whole inquiry process has been a huge and continues to be a huge focus. And again, K-8 kids use science notebooks now and really are taking on that role of this is the work a scientist does, and we record in there.
I know it's hard to see in the trends in this one test, but I really think you guys have done a great job here, and I can't imagine where we'd be at going into Common Core in this district if we hadn't have identified this,
Yeah,
a few years ago
indeed.
and started working on it. So I think this is a good piece of momentum we have here.
No, I think
More to
our
do,
teachers
but
are very
good.
dedicated to it. Every middle level science teacher has been involved with Vermont Science Initiative, which has been huge. As I said, our 3-4s, as they finish up the math and they start jumping into the science. This year, because Common Core has such a vocabulary emphasis, we've really beefed up the vocabulary, content area vocabulary. And again, the materials purchasing, and thank you for that extra money in the budget, makes a huge difference in terms of consistency across classrooms of what's available for resources. So, our
too, if the co-teaching is going to support all across the board.
It will in some area. I mean, it depends where the co-teaching's happening. I mean, specifically our ELL teacher and classroom teachers co-teach in science. That's one area where that has happened and will continue to happen. You know, sometimes you can't co-teach in everything all the time. It's just not possible. So, you know, some are doing literacy, some are doing math, some are doing science. But it's yeah, it's good. So we're happy with where we are. We have a huge way to go, and everyone's really aware of that. But you know, overall, I think this has been good work. Oh, is this a new slide? So we're continuing to partner with Vermont Science Initiative. We're continuing to implement all the best practices that are research-based that we really are, you know, 3 years ago worked so hard on. You know, we have rigorous inquiry tasks now that follow the scientific process. Kids are doing that over and over and over again. Just the amount of it is beefed up significantly. And then that nonfiction science texts and articles has been just a huge emphasis in the last 2 years, this year in particular. And that will continue to be. So our big picture summary is, you know, we know our scores are good. It's that good to great piece that we're working on, and you know, that takes a lot of work. Those kids that are in our lower two categories are really falling into mostly those two subgroups. And so it's that focus on those subgroups and understanding the dynamics of those subgroups, which are very different, IEP and SES, vastly different in what you need to do to really be successful. You know, our professional development is huge. You know, we have both sending people to things, bringing people into us, like our math initiative. I mean, they're out of Portland. We have teams going to things. We have individuals taking things. So that's really, I think, a huge component of what we're trying to keep everyone focused on.
Can I
And
add one thing?
yes, Carol's going to jump in.
I have to add this because I don't think we would be this far along if it wasn't for Jackie, who really, the follow-up, the instructional leadership has really been amazing. So there's a thank you to this one right here.
You're here.
Well, it's great. It's nice to go into classrooms and see the professional development that our teachers have had happen over and over and over again for all kids. I mean, that's, I think, the best part.
But we
Whether it be
don't-
science or literacy or math, it's looking for those similarities from classroom to classroom, and that's the good news.
It's the follow-up. We have lots of follow-up now in our system, and that is, makes us move forward.
So,
Makes you accountable,
So that's-
too, which is incredibly important.
It is.
yeah, I mean, it's great. And so that's where we are. As I said, you know, we could spend a whole nother meeting talking about specific action plans for each of these areas and can do that. It's just, you know, it's too much, as you can already see by the time, to pack into one evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Great, so let's continue and go through the rest of the reports to the board. So 5.1 Principals Report.
All right, I'm gonna try to go as quick as I can for time. So one of the things we put in there is the CSSU summer development, all the different training.
Yeah.
And the reason we put it in, because if you look at the technology ones, those were the drafts that we piloted last year at Williston. And now we took that draft model and spread it out across, you know, all of CSSU. So that, and you can see two of them are our teachers who are providing that. So that's something we've grown because it worked so well last year. That was one thing. The other part that I wanted you to say, you know, one of the things we have in the budget is money for a World of Difference training that is in this budget. And we send a team of our teachers actually do a workshop in the Boston conference, which is called it's New England Youth Congress. And these are the evaluations of those students from their peers as far as how well they presented. So these are both sides. I can just pass those down so you can.
So these are students, not faculty?
These are students evaluating our students. This is a student congress where our students actually, not only do they attend, they present.
Presented, yeah. That's
And
what
so
I said
these are
to
their
them.
evaluations from the other students in their presentation, which just talks about the leadership. This is the 10th year of a World of Difference. that we've had this. The other thing I wanted to point out as we go through the data that our student body is changing. We have doubled the number of students in the SES category in the last 5 years. We've gone from 9% to 18%. And when you look at our students who are identified in the 4 categories of need, which is being identified for 504 protection under the law, English language learners, socioeconomic status, and IEP, it now represents 31% of all of our students in Williston are unduplicated in those 4 categories, which means there are 334 out of about 1,087 are in those categories. 31%.
And to that end, I think similar to the CSSU presentation, when you do this again, it would be helpful in graph terms to see those different demographic blocks to understand how they're performing.
Right.
At our
At your
local level.
local level.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can do that.
Yep.
Yep.
I think that was one of the
That was
questions.
really helpful to see.
Yeah.
I agree with Josh there.
So I think one thing people think is that Williston is an average community, and actually, we have a lot of identified students that have special needs. And those are the ones that are in that 15% that we're working so hard to meet their needs. That's what it's all about, really. It takes a lot more work to do that and help those students learn. And the one thing I wanted to share with you is we have some, this is the part of the answer. You've heard a lot about the students with IEPs, and this is data coming out of Spark. And we have 8 students in Spark that are identified that are working through the Spark program. Here, I'll just give some. No, this is ours. We started it this year for the first time. And Spark occurs after school. These students are staying after school. These 8 students are working with 2 special educators. They are staying after school for 6 hours a week. And of that, 4.5 hours are direct instruction with a program called Read 180. And these are probably some of our students that have the most severe learning needs. And if you look at the 2 columns on average, what they do is measure lexile, which is degree of difficulty of words, and their growth and how well they're reading. And
So what's the, I'm sorry, maybe I can get a little bit of a background. What sparked this?
I could do all that. Spark is an after-school.
No, what sparked it? What's the initiative? How did this come about? What's the goal? What's the, is there an endpoint, or is this,
Yeah,
this a study you're trying to do?
No, that's what he just said, it's
We put
extended
this in
school
this year
hours.
for the first time.
No,
Molly,
but what's its goal?
the goal is to extend the learning time for students that are really struggling to learn. It's an
Okay, so you're
extended day
identifying
program.
students that have needs.
Yep, and either on IEPs or on Tier 2, which means the classroom program is not being successful, they need extra help. And what we needed to do is, we went to Boston and kind of watched the way they were piloting them in the Boston schools, how they have this longer day where there's a
Yeah,
concentrated
okay.
effort.
Yeah, I get that.
So this is showing the results out of and there's 2 groups. The top side are the 8 students that are in Spark. The students below are in regular classes in the regular lab, the way that the school usually runs. An average gain in Lexile score per year is 75 to 100 points. That's average gain. If you look at the growth factors, you look at the first 2 columns, and then it says the growth factor. The first student has a growth factor through April of 255 Lexile points. The second student has a growth factor through April of 114. They still have the rest of April and all of May to go. The next student has 218, next one has 315, and then 47, because that one just moved in, 130, 195, 418 Lexile points, and then 51. And if you look at the last one, it's because this student's already passing the kneecap test. So this is the kind of results we're looking at, is how do you help these students grow more than 1 year in a year's time? And what we looked at is the characteristics down below and said, so what makes the difference? And number 1 is they have 90 minutes, 3 days a week of instruction after school. So when school gets out at 3 o'clock, they go to their classroom. There are 8 of them, and they work with 2 teachers from 3 to 4:30, 3 days a week.
8 kids.
8
2
kids.
teachers.
Yep.
Beautiful.
That's awesome.
Then we have They have uninterrupted time. There are no other students around. Nobody bothers them. They're not pulled to go anyplace else. No assemblies, no nothing.
No music lessons.
So we can afford that?
Yeah, because we're trading teacher time to do it. We're using a flex schedule. We have small group, 8 students, 2 adults. And back page, we have laser focus, which is important. We are working on one skill area, which is reading, Read 180. We have the expertise of these teachers is phenomenal. And they have built this solid relationship. This is almost like a club where they love to come, they love to stay. In fact, they have other students asking if they can join now and come in and work. So what they've also done is it changes the students' attitude about themselves as they see themselves as learners, they see that they can be successful at school.
I think to that last point, with having other students expressing a desire, as we go into our next budget cycle next year, and we've got a year of this under our belt, I would certainly like to get feedback from the administration about whether there's a need to expand the opportunities here and whether we need to deal with that from a budgetary
We're going to try to
perspective.
expand for next year without additional cost. I said, this is trade. This is trade time.
Do you have more people who are eager to support, train teachers who are willing and able? You don't know
We
yet.
don't know yet.
We don't know, we're waiting to get the budget through.
Okay.
I wanted to say, Josh, that vision calendar, were that to happen, not next year, but the year after, then we might look at this during those intersessions as a model. I mean,
Yeah.
we're watching this SU-wide.
Yeah,
Yeah, that will have an effect too.
it could have a huge effect.
Yeah.
And so this fits along, we had Kristen Gessman come and talk to us about what makes a difference for kids. And it's small group instruction, highly qualified teachers, time,
Time.
and relationships. And this is a tight group of 8 kids and 2 teachers. They celebrate progress together, they set goals together, they love working together. And here it is, they're working from 8:15 until 4:30 at night.
So contrast the tier 3, the second group. Who is this? Why am I not seeing
This is,
favorable results?
the second one is, it's 40 minutes a day, 5 days a week, so that's 200 minutes. In the middle of a day, though, where they go 40 minutes, but actually by the time it all settles down and they get in their seats, they lose about 10 minutes. So now they have 30 minutes of instruction, but in the middle of the day with all the other students around, walking down the halls and all that sort of thing. So there's many other possible interruptions, whereas this is very private. You're upstairs in a room, it's upstairs in a room, nobody else is upstairs, it's 8 kids and 2 teachers, and they can concentrate. They don't have to worry about anybody thinking, oh, you must need some extra help, there must be something wrong with you. Nobody even sees them.
And again, this is not for all kids, these are our most,
These are really deficit.
our learners that are most deficit, that have the most challenges and need the really precise teaching so they'll learn. I mean, most kids don't need that, but there is a group that needs that desperately if we're going to expect them to catch up and then get ahead. So,
Yeah, I know, but there has to be balance too, right? So, obviously, these are kids in need.
right.
Yes.
What about the kids who don't need?
They don't have to, well, tier 2 is what the other part of Spark is tier 2, which is math and literacy instruction by 2 specialists, and they have about 6 students each. And what we're looking at is to say, what's the best way to set up that program to make it have enough of the impact we want it to?
I think what he's,
Let me say what I mean. It might be easier. Balance, right? We've got kids who need extra help, but kids who don't. So why don't you offer this same program to kids who don't need the extra help, who could then shine even more? Or, I think this is a response to kneecap, right? This
Two groups.
improves our
Two
kneecap
subgroups.
dramatically, in a category that makes a big difference, that looks good on a piece of paper, okay? But we are members of a school system, and we all have kids in there, and they're not all IEP kids. So we're taking a portion of our money and are putting into this special program for kids. And I understand that it would look weird if we had just this program after school for kids who didn't have special needs. There would be complaints that that's not fair, right?
So we have another program after school, per house.
And that's what a proposal is?
No, it's already in place.
No, we're just seeing data tonight on a very specific set of students
Right.
for a very specific problem.
Okay.
There are other programs.
I wasn't familiar with that
I
program at all.
understand.
We
And
have
it's new,
a,
it just-
right
Yeah,
now,
and
we
this is
have
new,
a
which is why we're talking about
house-based
it too.
homework club for every single house, grades 3 through 8. That every house has somebody that works with the kids after school, and they keep it in small group, targeted instruction for all the houses.
But those
And
are still kids that
those
have
are
a
still-
need
they
typically.
still have a
It would
need.
be our enrichment program, what you're thinking of,
That's,
yeah.
yeah.
We have
I think
enrichment.
then
Yeah.
we need to talk, we would have to have a separate conversation about what programs we offer for enrichment,
Right,
which is sort
yeah.
of the
Huge.
other side of this, in a sense. So, I just, I think you've, I agree with what you're saying, I just think that there's more to be seen. So,
I think, yeah, you just
the
need a little
context
more
is
background.
important.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I think that's obvious. I mean, I would be surprised if,
So-
2 teachers and 8 kids wouldn't do well.
Again, in the interest of time, I know we need to move on, but I do have a question. So the tier threes in the second portion of the data here, that these are the folks that are seeing the 40-minute time periods
Yes.
in the middle of the day.
Yes,
It's not a very encouraging
no.
thing here. You know, instead of being concerned about, that we have a small number of students that are excelling in this program, I'm kind of more concerned about the fact that we have a larger amount of students who are getting, you could look at it in the worst case and arguably say no benefit at all, if you look at these numbers. That's concerning.
And that's where I think as a system,
And I don't
Yeah.
think
to
that
look
that's,
at,
case, but I think that this.
yeah, well, that's why you save this data. It's to look and say, so is this intervention appropriate for these kids?
Right.
You
And
know,
it's really tied to the length of our school day. I mean, what this really says to me is, we don't have enough time in our school day to do everything that we want to do for every kiddo.
And even more specifically, we don't have time in the school day.
to address
Oh,
the outliers, the kids that need that extra help, because they already have to get the basics in on top, and then they need help learning how to learn the basics on top of it.
Right.
So it's a double whammy.
And the
So
tier-
it's a challenge that we need to keep our eye on.
And the tier 3, where are they being pulled out of? You might have said that and I missed it, but
No, they could, I
Are
think
they
they
being
try to
pulled
keep them from being pulled out of a
Yeah.
class, but that's the
The
other
balance.
problem during the day is what are you missing to
Yeah.
get your extra help? It could be, not because you ever want to do it, but it could be another class because it's the only way they can schedule it, whereas I think the parents had to agree with this. They knew right off that this was a win-win because they're not missing their class time.
Right.
They're getting extra time.
Yeah.
So the tier 3 wasn't set up with? Was it set up with like 8 students, 2 teachers, same scenario?
No.
No.
So you can't compare them?
So,
Well, you can, because you're seeing the benefit of Spark versus the
So-
status quo.
so I'm sorry to interrupt, but I do want to move on, but my last comment on this is, keep this in mind when we get to our action matter about the after-school program, because I think
yeah.
there's some discussion we can have there. Okay? So why don't we continue, because
Yep.
we're, my goal is not to have a record meeting tonight.
I'm done.
You're done?
Okay, so,
Can I just, one quick,
please.
this has to do with John Turco's report. He mentioned that there was an area in the audit that we needed to work on. He didn't identify what that was. I was just wondering if you could identify,
Go back
is
to
it
that.
minor, nominal, is it significant? I just didn't know.
I don't know.
Can you remind me where you are, Josh?
5.1, principals report.
Right.
There was a Title I audit.
There was an
Yes.
audit.
There's only one
Yeah.
area we need to work on, but
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
I-
So we haven't gotten I wait every day in my email, we haven't gotten the full report back from them yet, which is surprisingly late considering when this happened, almost a month ago, 3 weeks ago. But as they had their closing conference with us, not only in the Williston early reading program for Title I kiddos, but also in another school's program, what was brought to light was an emphasis to work more with parents. They have particular federal guidelines around what has to happen for a Title I school. And one of them is you have to have adequate communication with parents, and you have to have a parent compact, and neither of our Title I schools have that. These weren't like emergency worrisome things regarding the important stuff, which is instruction, nor was there any emergency around our outcomes for these kids, which are very good. So, but they were minor. We're actually not going to be cited. We're going to have a recommendation, they told us, around the parent compact and around just continued meetings, regular meetings with parents of kiddos who are in the Title I program. So those are the two things that I came away with, but I'm kind of waiting for it in writing. I don't have that yet.
I guess I would ask when the appropriate time is that you report back to us on what those
Yeah.
actual.
Yep,
you know,
and I get
deficits
that.
are,
Yeah.
and if there's a plan to address them.
Yes, good,
Thank you.
sure.
Very good. Okay. 5.2, CSSU debrief, legislative update. I'm at a bit of a loss. What do we, the three of us that were there, was there anything specific? I know we have the legislative breakfast coming up, and I know there was some discussion around one particular bill that's come to light in the legislature right now that has to do with how possibly there could be a change in how we vote our budgets, and you'd have to vote the CSSU budget. And this is on the surface doesn't seem like a big deal, but if you go down into the details, it gets concerning, because if we present our CSSU budget separate than our school budget, because right now, our assessments to the CSSU are in our $17 million budget, and we vote on it, and it goes. The change would be our budget would look smaller, and the CSSU budget would look huge, because it has transportation, it has everything, it has, millions of dollars across all 5 districts. And starting next year, it's going to also include special education, which will make it look even bigger. So the big problem is if the voting electorate goes to the polls and says, oh, our budget looks great for the CSU budget is huge, and doesn't vote, we don't have a budget. We don't have transportation, we don't have special ed, we don't have technology, we don't have all the things that we get assessed for. So, on the one hand, I think someone wants transparency, but on the other hand, it puts, supervisory unions in a tough situation. So that's sort of percolating up in the legislature right now. So the suggestion was made that perhaps we need to do a little research as board members and write a letter or two. So I have now transmitted that to you.
Who's the representative?
Don't know. That wasn't given to us, so I'm gonna ask, I'm gonna send a note to Elaine and ask her to see if she can't give us a little more detail so that we can help advocate, with a little more information.
Yeah.
And to that end, Monday morning is the legislative breakfast,
Right.
7:30 here.
No,
At CSSU, I believe.
At CSSU.
I think so.
Is it?
yes.
At CSSU. So everyone, feel free to come.
I can't go. But
So
Kevin,
is
you
it
said you're
here?
going.
It's in the offices in Shelburne.
Oh,
But we're gonna have you all over the county before we.
I don't know that I can make it, check my calendar. but-
Yeah.
Kevin's going. Are you?
Yeah,
you going?
I will
Can
be
you
able
go?
to make, I will go.
Okay, I can't either.
Okay.
take it back. It's in the CVU library.
Oh, so
Oh,
it's here.
that's here.
Well, Oh, that's right. True.
So here.
Thank you. for-
Yep.
So CVU library, Monday, 7:30, right?
Yep.
AM,
Yep.
Breakfast.
hence.
Breakfast. Food.
Okay, so, let's move on to 5.3, the FAPAC committee.
Okay, I'll go quick. I don't have much. We meet tomorrow morning at 8:15 in Williston Central. A parenting workshop around temperament was held on April 4th. Big Basket Raffle is this Saturday, so come and support that. It's a great event, and it's one of our biggest fundraisers, and it's a lot of fun if you've never gone. And they're working on the surveys. They've collected all the surveys, and they're looking at the data to see how to implement the fundraising efforts.
Fundraising, good,
Around Williston Wins. And that's it.
great,
Thank you.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
thank you. 5.4, policy committee. Any news there?
No, so we met, I want to say, a couple weeks ago. We reviewed a whole bunch of policies, and I'm not sure why we don't have any this month.
And actually, I think it was supposed to be transmitted to you that that's not on the agenda tonight. Sorry.
No, we don't have anything for
There's-
discussion or
no.
for action on our agenda, so there we go. We're set. That's all I have for board reports. So let's move into 6.0 discussion. 6.1 is budget. Hopefully this will be a quick discussion item. Do we have any, is there any new news, any updates? I think we're in kind of informational phase. I know that you've got information coming out on the Bell.
It's on the front page of the Bell. One thing that's, we're making sure people know, there's 3 ways you can vote. One is you can vote on the 7th. One is you can go to the town clerk's office and pick up a ballot and vote anytime you want, up to May 7th. And then the other one is you can ask them to mail you a ballot. So
Nice.
You can
So
just
they
go
have the
in there
ballots
now.
in hand now?
we ran them.
Great.
Oh,
That was my
nice.
one
No, we ran
logistical
them
thought.
off.
And that's why I was a little soft on my email. So I sent the email out that I meant to send out last week. I got it out today, and I've already gotten like 6 or 8 positive responses back. You know, thanks for getting back to us. This looks great. We'll support the board and we'll let people know. So that's a good thing.
What about community knowing like 3 ways to vote? Like how do we,
I think we can talk about that at FAP tomorrow.
Yep.
And get that out to
And there is
houses.
also.
beyond parents?
Right, but
beyond
there is
parents,
also an
yeah.
article tomorrow coming out in the Observer, who did contact me tonight, said she couldn't make it, and she would get back to me with questions about what we talked about tonight, but she interviewed me, and so it sounds like the Williston Observer will have some good information coming out too. So that'll be helpful, and then I think we need to
We need to-
do another, kind of boards corner coming up, soon. I mean, we're running out of time, we can't, I don't
Well,
think we
Josh-
can discuss anything after May 1st, so.
Well, Josh was gonna send something in, right?
I did volunteer to do that.
You did volunteer to do that.
And I thought she even gave you a deadline, right? The 22nd, I
Thank you.
think?
He was just glad she didn't have to do it.
Well, I also think though that, so I think the way you guys highlighted the dates in red and bold and the bell is great. I would like, if possible, to take advantage of, what are these boards called? The sandwich, the
Sandwich
the
boards.
tents? So we should really put those up like, and just leave them up. Because, oh, so, yeah, so, okay, so,
Yeah,
why wouldn't we as a school have some?
just, we've never, we've had the FAP ones.
I just think, yeah, I just think it behooves that we control that, because right now, they're designated completely for the raffle, right?
Oh, yeah, that's
So,
right, so. Well,
that-
after the basket raffle's good timing, because that's this weekend.
Yeah.
So we
Yeah.
can, maybe they'll let us repurpose them.
All right, so,
So, Deb, if you'll take that question to the FAPAC. Okay, any more discussion on the budget? Great,
I've heard good things.
yeah, so have
Very
I.
excited about it, so I think we're good.
Okay, so there's a discussion matter 6.2, CSSU board composition, CVU representation. So for those of you who aren't familiar, there was a discussion that came up at the last CSSU board meeting with a request from the CVU board, who is composed of 11 members, 12 members? It's a large number because it's
It's at
CVU is,
least
yeah,
11.
it has reps from all the towns. That they asked if they could have another rep to the CSSU board, because they have a lot of people on their board with a lot of opinions, and they're having trouble communicating what's happening at their back into their constituency. And the way it's portrayed by them is that they're more concerned about being able to sit at the board and understand what's going on and keep their board aware so that they can represent correctly than it is about having another seat on the board to alter like a voting kind of thing. And to that point, you know, I've thought about it a little bit. I was originally kind of conservative about it, thinking, well, everything's working, let's not tip the boat here. But I think I can understand their concern. They have a lot of things that they're trying to deal with, and I don't think another person sitting on the board from CVU is gonna alter the power structure that much. That being said,
On the CCSU board?
so at the
CVU.
supervisory union level, we have
Yeah.
that board. And that board right now consists of 2 people from every board, right? Is it that?
Three.
Three from every board. So they want a 4th. So I misspoke.
so,
I'd
I'm
like-
sorry, I'm missing this. Who's wanting a fourth?
CVU, the high
Oh.
school. So the high school, who has a large 12-member board of their own,
Yeah, okay.
It's big.
would like to have a 4th seat at the board so that they will, A, feel better represented, and B, feel that they can communicate then with, amongst themselves better with another person on the board. And, well, here's why it's coming to here, because it directly affects our voting powers on that board if we allow one more than everybody else
I think
for
it should be
CVU.
balanced.
If I could offer a
Yes.
counterpoint. And I certainly appreciate the CVU's position. And if I may add another argument in that they represent a very large chunk, not of numbers, but of grades, if you will, and have a perspective that is unique to the board. But if you do look at it from a proportional representation perspective, one could argue that we are as equally deserving of that voice as CVU. And while I do believe CSSU operates in a manner towards consensus, and there's rarely a very divided vote, we did run into an issue this past fall on allocation of expenses where the vote was tight, or could have been very tight, and one vote could have swayed a difference that would have made a meaningful impact on budgetary issues. So I don't think it's an easy, from my perspective, it's not an easy vote one way or the other.
I agree with
I agree.
Necessarily a good idea to give up positions. Okay, so the consensus from this board,
Because I think that us three as representatives need to be
Yeah.
consistent, is that we're opposed. All right,
Yeah.
let's just make sure that we're good at explaining it, so that everybody understands on that board why we feel that way. And then that's how we'll represent ourselves. Is that
Sounds
seem
great.
appropriate? Okay. Okay, and I think we've tackled 6.3, board corners communications, because three people ducked and one person caught, so, Josh, you're up for that, so we're good there. So let's go on to action matters, 7.0.
I think you brought another matter up into discussion, the snow day discussion.
Oh, shoot, you're right. Here I am looking at it right now. I apologize. So we moved the snow days out of action and into discussion. And I'll try and explain this, but if I'm wrong, catch me here. So if the way I understand it is the way the calendar is laying out right now, we actually have to go into next year into that Monday in June. And it would kind of be logical to not call school in the session on that Monday, except that exposes the calendar if we have extra snow days. And then we would have to go into that Monday in June. So I think there's still some, do I understand right? There's still some work being done to see if there's some way to make that.
So you understand, this is what we're talking about for this current year, not for the next calendar.
Yeah.
This is about the snow days that we've had, and just to get your input at this level
Gotcha.
with a vote next time.
did not understand.
Yeah, so it's for this current year, understanding that right now, were we to allocate those 3 snow days
Yeah, we-
as they're theoretically supposed to be, kids would come back on a Monday in June.
That makes a lot more sense. I couldn't quite figure out what we're
The reason we can't actually take a vote today is because we're a little bit at risk, were there to be a weather incident. Now, we'd have an additional snow day, and then students would come on Tuesday as well, which would mean that we can't vote on the Monday and make that decision yet. So Elaine would just like to get the pulse of the board, should there be
Yeah.
no weather incidents between now and the next board meeting, how you imagine you will
Later in
play
the
this
spring.
out, so that if there's no more weather, you could make decisions about graduation and such things like that.
So we've had 2 snow days this year?
3.
Three,
That's why
really?
that's why it's an issue and drives us into the Monday. I understand that.
And typically, we've not come back for Monday.
No, and typically we do not
Friday.
come
Oh,
back for
because
Monday.
our calendar year is due to end on the 12th, which is a Wednesday.
Correct.
But now it'll be Thursday,
But
Friday.
now it'll be Thursday and Friday,
Right, I get it.
and theoretically Monday also, unless.
Teachers would come, but students would be released, would be waived.
I don't want to be the stick in the mud, so to speak. And I'm not saying I support pushing to Monday, but I want to frame this in a greater area of concern, which is I think we've seen a retraction on the number of school days, minor, over the last few years. If anything, I'd like to see expanded time for our kids in line with our discussions about Spark. Anecdotally, having 2 children in the system, I know that last week there isn't a lot of academic time to begin with.
Pretty much nil.
So it's more of the general concept. I think we're already pressed for getting time with our kids, and now we're talking about another day. I think it needs to be part of a larger discussion, but I just wanted to raise that here.
Yeah.
I
understand.
I would just say that adding those days at the tail end, are they productive academic days? I think people are, children are disconnected. They have to clear the classrooms. Everything has to be ready, right, for them to just take off. So,
Isn't there usually a field day or something?
Well, there's all kinds of activities. It depends upon the house. There's
Couldn't
one
Monday
of
just
many.
be a field day? Like, can it be the field day?
Well,
why,
but
though?
why? Because
Yeah.
Why? So then Friday can be a regular educational day.
Well, I
I
don't
would
think we
challenge the assumption that you're gonna get that efficiency out of the students
I would agree.
on that last week.
Oh, you have such.
I think if I take an even bigger picture view, this doesn't solve the problem, but if you start to look at whether we want to adopt the vision calendar, all of a sudden that calendar, I think, helps these sorts of issues, because your snow day, school day thing is gonna change dramatically.
But the vision calendar, not to digress, I was a little disappointed because it looks at the same amount of school days. There's no material increase. It chops them up differently, but it doesn't increase the number of academic days.
But you're not gonna increase the number of academic days until you get concessions at
money.
negotiations.
Well, we're heading towards negotiations.
I understand, but you
So
can't assume, but the vision calendar relies upon other districts too, because the vision calendar has to line up at the high school level with the technical centers. So there's all of these variables that drive us towards perhaps not the best calendar, but I would argue that it would certainly be an improvement.
It's a start to make the learning not so compact.
And I'm saying that
Yeah.
in full agreement with your opinion.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, what is this vision calendar? I had never heard of that. No, well, I see it, but
Yeah,
there's no background, it's just a calendar.
okay. Yeah, let's take it offline, and I'll be happy to
Yeah.
discuss it with you, because
Okay.
I'm worried about time here.
Yeah.
Okay, so so this is why this is a discussion matter. They're taking the pulse of the board. If, in fact, we, really what it comes down to is, are we willing to excuse the Monday for our students or not? And that's really what what Elaine wants to know. She's gonna take that input in with all the other school boards and, make a decision. Right?
It'll come back for a vote. So I think she just wanted the opportunity for folks to debate and talk about it.
So, does anybody feel strongly one way or the other? This is the time to speak, because that's gonna be
I
taken back.
think we should, I think if need be, we should just finish the week and just call it a day.
I'm inclined to do that, so, rather than come back from.
I would
Monday.
love the extra time with staff,
Yeah,
just on that
that's what
front. I think it could be
really-
extremely productive, because right now we have one staff day at the end of the year, and that is a lot of wrap up and transitioning. We talk about, the kids that are incoming to teachers and whatnot. So another day would give us really more time to look at Common Core, to get ahead on, the scheduling for next year, but particularly some of those units that we're looking at implementing next year. So from that angle, it would be fabulous to have another day with staff.
I agree with Javon. If it comes down to it, I'm comfortable with sacrificing the day. Okay, if there's no more discussion on it, let's move to action. So the first item on our action matters is the after-school program. So Walter, could I turn it over to you and ask you to, oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, we
See,
have
I'm getting the
calendar.
calendar
You're getting
thing.
the calendar?
I got it now. Now I really got it on my problem. So
Okay,
7-1. So now we're talking about our local calendar for next
Next
year.
year.
So can I have a motion off the table to adopt and then we'll discuss?
I'll make a motion to adopt the calendar as presented for 2013-14.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, discussion. Does anyone have any? If we brought this up for discussion last month, I don't think there was much issue with it. Any further issue?
Other than
Other than,
incorporating my comments about, I think we should be pushing
Fairly
towards a
noted.
longer, longer school year for the kids.
Absolutely.
okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes. Hey, 7.2, the after-school program.
We're getting there.
So this is
Now that I'm back on track, I apologize.
This is a
Walter, I'll turn to you.
comparison of the two programs that I've made for you so that you can kind of look at them, and I can go through it briefly if you'd like. Basically, the YMCA is and it's the YMCA compared to Part 2, which is the Heinsberg program. I don't know if I just want to give you a minute to read it, or do you want me to?
Just give us a sec here.
Yeah,
Pardon?
Just give us just a moment.
Okay.
Walter, the last two on the YMCA, new or?
They are new. They actually said that they were offered those whether we went with them or not. Those are two things they're piloting right now in other school districts. And they said they would offer those whether we went with them or not, if we wanted them.
So give us some background. There's, the reason that we need to take action on this tonight is because the Part 2 program needs to know,
By
by today.
They put a deadline of today because they need the planning time, is what they're talking about. They needed enough advance notice to hire the people they'd like to get the right people in place, to begin to advertise, to talk to parents, all the other things that they will need to do to get it in place. They're working right now in Shelburne. I think they've already met with kindergarten parents in Shelburne to at least begin the process over there. And I think they're going to be working in Shelburne next year, is my understanding. So that's why they put that deadline. We waived the YMCA deadline, which was April 1st, and they accepted that, I think, till May 15th. But then Part 2 is saying, we have to know. We can't, if we can't know today, we're just not going to, we can't do it. Don't come back to us. We just can't do it.
I only have one question, and I don't know that I necessarily see it here, and I thought we were gonna have a little more background. So implementing, if we decide to move forward with Part 2, it will require some funds from us to get it going, which will ultimately be repaid back, right? Because parents will pay for it.
I don't
Is that
think
right or
that's
no?
true.
No.
Okay, all right,
Yeah.
that's all I needed to
There's no
ask.
funds, I think, out of pocket at all.
So, if I may, I have some,
Mm-hmm.
let's start with the money issues first. Guaranteed $55,000 with YMCA and projected money. Can you explain to me the funding mechanism, how that's gonna work, and how you're coming up with $50,000?
Yeah, what they do is they're looking at the current YMCA membership, in other words, how many kids are there currently, and they're using that as the baseline, and then they have a funding formula where they figure out, okay, what is it will cost us to put the program in place? And for them, it's not necessarily about the profit they're making. That's the YMCA, it's a profit maker. For them, it's just putting the service in place. And so that's why they can say the minimum, if we had the same number of kids, if we didn't expand at all, we'd make about $50,000, minimum.
Do you have a budget that we can look at?
I sent you, well, what I did send you in the last one is, they showed us their exact budget of how it was broken down. Yeah, that was
Why-
one of,
The Y did.
no, the
That's step two?
part two sent you their breakdown for, actually it was Heinsberg. And I sent it to you online, and it gave, like, here's our staffing, here's our expenses, here's our training.
But that wasn't a projected Williston budget. That
No,
was
they just
based on-
wanted to show you kind of like, this is what it looks like.
Okay. And then, I recall from that prior packet that the YMCA does offer scholarships for kids in need. What can you tell me about those potential opportunities?
Same, they're the same.
It'd be identical.
They go right to the state, because it's paid for by the state.
Okay.
And there was very little participation, if I recall, there were like 3 kids or something like that. Not to say that that's not, we should not consider it, but.
I like the fact that we can control the staff in the program,
I like the
because
fact
I
that
think that will extend the day for those kids.
I agree.
continuity.
Yeah.
In my experience with the Y, they have sometimes curriculum that isn't necessarily what the group might want. And I think it's good to have control over that.
I'm sorry, just a quick question. The participation in the program, we're really pretty much bound by the amount of space we have from that perspective, I assume, right? Because,
I think part two considers to be, I mean, considering they have almost double the number of kids we do right now, and they're in a much smaller school, I think they feel like they can grow the program pretty easily.
that was my other question, is, are there growth opportunity issues that, that, a continuity at the very least, as we move forward? I mean,
Good point.
So I think what part two can say is that the same person who established Heinsberg put together the
Yeah, the
entire
track record
program in
speaks for
South
itself.
Burlington,
Yeah.
which is still in existence today.
Yeah.
They were the first ones to pull out of the YMCA and offer it themselves, and the person that's running part two is the one who headed it up.
okay.
And have you found YMCA to be flexible with our requests for programmatic concerns, operational concerns?
They are. I mean, that's why I sat down with them just yesterday and said, talk to me about what are you doing? They offered more money on the table. They said we can, we'll look at the hiring model, because we said, we need at least a lead educator in there who really can put together programs that will match our curriculum, things like that, so that it really is an extension of the day, not all the time, but some of the time, that it has an academic side to it. And they said, we can be as flexible as you want us to be.
And are there any complaints from parents about the YMCA program?
I don't get them directly. I mean, other people, the Y might get them, but I don't get them directly.
I think something to keep into perspective that I don't know that we've necessarily discussed it is, we were in this similar situation last year.
Mhm.
So the Y had a year really of opportunity to really integrally connect to what we have. And, the information that you shared, they presented, they put together, showed a little bit of it, but I think for me, it left a lot of question marks. And, if this was really their year to prove themselves, to retain our business, and I honestly don't know that they necessarily did that to the best of their abilities.
Right.
That's what I would say.
I mean, there has been a little bit of working together, not necessarily a lot, but I think there has been some. We've had some meetings and so forth, but if you say, except for the technology part that we worked on, and our students actually were our Spark students used the iPads and took pictures of their kids, and that became part of their display during the holidays. But other than that, we didn't really connect that much.
Right, so I think that's an important
Yeah,
metric.
it's not because they don't want to. I think trying to get the two schedules to match up where people are free is very, very hard to do.
And they report to a different organization, they're different goals, I mean, it's pretty obvious, right?
Right. But it's not because they're not willing. I would never say that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, right. Can I give my opinion in terms of my,
Yes,
like, my
I think we've
stance?
got to draw the question here anyway.
I think we should move forward with part 2. That's what I think.
Does anybody have a significant, differing opinion that,
I'm gonna
Don't
vote
wanna-
against. In the absence of a budget from step 2, to understand the numbers, and that the Y hasn't done anything significantly to do anything wrong, I'm not prepared to go in a new direction, especially in the absence of a budget, and not understanding. I mean, we've got a guaranteed $55,000 for the program that works, and we've got possibly a very good program with part 2, without a budget, at a time when they're going through significant expansion. So if I have to vote today, it's not to say that I would feel differently with more information, but with the information I have presented today, I'm going to vote against.
Any other discussion?
okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Favor of what?
All in favor of, well, the motion on the table is to, okay. Do we have a motion on the table,
Oh, you know
actually?
what? I don't know.
I-
Yeah,
I don't think we made a
did.
motion.
Sorry.
Okay, I need a motion on the table. Someone make a motion one way or the other, and we'll vote as we see fit.
I'd like to make a motion to adopt part 2 as part of our after-school program for the next school year.
I'll second.
Okay, so, I think we've had our discussion. So to be clear, voting for is voting for adoption of part 2. Voting against is status quo. So, with that in mind, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Nay.
It passes. So, we will move forward with part 2. So Walter, please keep us abreast of how you're gonna, really, I think the next step is really how you're gonna plan the transition. Yeah,
And communicate to parents. That's,
yeah,
It's gonna be
the
big.
next big step is gonna be parent communication. Because this is change.
And a lot of parents rely upon the Y program for childcare
Right.
after school.
So we need to make sure everyone understands that that,
it's a change.
the change, there's a change, but with the intent of an improvement in service, not the other way. That's how I,
Yeah, that's what I would.
I mean, that's,
More parental input.
And I
Okay.
would not position it as a revenue line by any means. It's more how to, cohesively integrate.
Spend the day.
okay. We have one more action item here, 7-4 to award an electrical upgrade contract. So Walter, if you could just take a moment and explain.
Sure. The voters approved that we would work on the efficiency at ABS. So we have gone out to bid on page 32, I think, of this packet. There are 3 bids. The second lowest bid is Peck Electric. And it says we are recommending the bid be awarded to Peck Electric in the amount of $116,200. We have reviewed capability of each firm to handle a project of this magnitude and do not believe that Green Light has the sufficient project experience or resources to be considered. So the recommendation is Peck Electric, and there's a second part which says we would also like the board to approve the use of $24,600 in the existing fund balance to augment the financing of for the project. This amount keeps the debt service cost in the future in line with the project savings and budget neutral. So there's actually 2 parts. One is the bid and one is the use of funds.
Okay, so I'm learning as I go here, I'm getting better every meeting. So let's see if we can craft a motion.
Motion and then discuss it. So I think the motion needs to have 2 parts.
So move to choose Peck Electric and with the,
Transfer
with,
of funds.
and the transfer of the funds as proposed in the materials set forth.
Good. Do we have a second?
Second?
Great. Discussion, folks.
I guess I just want to understand, so this is something that we had approved, right? In the
Well,
past?
The voters approved it.
Right.
So now administration went out and got bids for the work. And
Right.
so now it's our job to pick the bid
Right.
and approve
I
that,
get that.
right?
What I don't understand is why we need more money.
We don't need more
No.
money, we need to put the money in the right place.
Oh, thank you.
That's the key part of this, right?
Thank
Is
you.
that the correct way?
Yeah, we
to-
have to pay
Yes.
for the work.
Right, and it has to come out of and it needs to come out of general fund to do that.
Yeah, and we want it to be, so this, what they usually say is that they want it to be cost neutral, so throwing in a little bit of extra money will actually make it pay for itself, so it won't show up as an increase in the budget. It's kind of like the savings in electric will pay for the payments kind of thing. It's balancing out. We did the same thing at WCS, which has already been done.
Yep.
That was done a couple of years ago, and it's already done. And actually, we saved money.
Yep. Okay. Any other discussion? All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Okay. Consent agenda. If you recall, we take a motion for the entire agenda and then discuss and vote on it. So can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I make a motion that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Okay, discussion quickly. Anything
Nope.
here? I think Joshua indicated he needed to vote a certain way because he wasn't present for one of the meetings. So with that in mind, if there's no discussion, all in favor of approving consent agenda?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Yes.
Motion passes with one abstention. Item 9, director's comments. We added this to the agenda a few years ago now, I think, just because we were concerned that, with the way the agenda's set up, we discuss what's on the agenda, and that's what we have. This is a short time period. If anybody has anything else they want to talk about, it's a discussion point only. We can't take action on it. Anything?
Nope.
Great.
Good.
Nothing here myself. So very quickly, next meeting dates. You've got a policy committee meeting on April 17th, 8 AM at CVU. We have a board chairs meeting on April 30th, 8 AM at CVU. I gotta check on that. Are you around on
What day
April?
is it?
Yeah, I don't know. Is that during? If that's,
No,
it's
it's not
not?
during break.
Okay, then, okay then.
I can, if you want.
Okay, I'll let you know. Our next CSSU board meeting is May 8th at 5 PM, and our next board meeting is May 8th at 7 PM. But bear in mind, what's not on here is that we do have an informational meeting scheduled on May 1st, where we, as a board, will need to present our new budget to the town for their consideration prior to the vote on the 7th. So you will see a meeting notice come for that.
So May 1st at 6 PM in WCS auditorium, that's what it's expected.
That is correct. Okay?
Yep.
So, prior to adjournment, we need to go into executive session, but in order to do that, we need Elaine.
May I say one thing?
Sir.
For your interest, there's a new board orientation
Oh,
meeting that
thank
you will
you.
want to know about. And last year, because of, I forget, was it a weather event? We
didn't have it.
weren't able to have it. So if you missed it last year, those new last year, new this year, you're expected at the April 17th new board orientation meeting from 5:30 to 7:30. And that's at CSSU, I believe. CSSU 5:30.
And the fun doesn't stop.
Dinner is served, by the way.
I'm gonna try to attend that too. They've asked for board chairs to come and listen and learn too, so I'm good with that if I can make it. Two other things, the legislative breakfast, so make sure that everybody understands, that's Monday, right?
Monday,
Yes.
7:30 at the library here.
Okay, I know we mentioned it earlier, but I wanted to make sure everybody understood that was there. You're more than invited. And then the last thing we brought up in executive session tonight, earlier, was the training dates for negotiations, and I'm not sure when that is. It was a lot
April-
flying by.
The first one's April 30th, it sounds like,
Okay,
from
So-
4:30 to 7:30, I think. It's a 3-hour training. And I want to say May 28th is the next date.
but don't hold me. to
Right,
it.
and the April 30th training, there was discussion about who needed to attend and who didn't, and I think basically I think my take from it is if you're interested to attend, then attend. That's what it came down to.
Yes.
So, given all of that, prior to adjournment, we need a motion to go into executive session for personnel reasons.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you.